Well, what's going on, guys? I'm Dobry and this is not Guild Wars 2. No, for this video we're not going to be looking at cool animations and our Guardians Eternity and Mood and Flame Seekers and so on and so forth. What we are going to do instead, we're going to talk how the April 15 changes affected our builds. First things first, what did the patch change? Apart from the huge reduction in money making options, it changed critical damage big time. ANET officially announced 10% overall reduction in damage. They kinda lied to us. All out crit builds lost over like 40% crit damage, and I'm going to demonstrate you because I have made a simple build with all out ferocity. So here we have berserkers, runes of rage for the most ferocity as possible. We have berserkers here and we have 100 power anti-ferocity, so that's as much ferocity as you can get. What does that amount to? 236% crit damage. Now, pre-patch, the critical damage was only a single simple amount that was combined from all the gear. It had a 150% hidden multiplier. So it was 150% plus what the critical damage amount would say. So we had 150 plus 126 max. That was 276% extra critical damage on a critical hit. Well done. Now you see what's the change here. 40%. Freaking 40% reduction in critical damage for max critical damage builds. Awesome, right? Not. Okay, so first things first. This means that we can no longer achieve amounts of like 100% on the extra critical damage. This is as high as it gets, and this minus 150 means that the most critical damage post-patch that you can get is 86% on gear and stats and traits and everything. Oh boy. There's your 10% in it. Thank you. So, okay. That means every build that was based on critical damage got hit one way or the other. The more critical damage you stacked, the higher reduction on it you just got. So let's see what does that mean for our builds. Here we have the perfect crit build. This is the build with right hand strength and with meditations that give you fury. So this is your perfect crit build. It has 66% crit chance, which is more like 65. It's rounded up. 65 plus 15 plus 20 is exactly 100% crit chance. So let's take a look at it this way. With 100% crit chance, and this is actually 64% critical damage, what would that mean for us? 100% crit chance here over, let's say, 65, because the 65 is the breakpoint here. We will be doing over 2 times the normal damage on a hit. So the multiplier for our hits will be 2.15, which is really nice. This build turns amazing for PvE. With this build you can do lots of damage, you can drop single targets very quickly. Now I cannot say it's all that good for dungeons, but you can still make it work. Because it's perfect crits. Come on, who doesn't like perfect crits? And not to mention, it's evenly good at close range as it is from normal range. And since we'll be using the scepter for that, we won't be using the staff, because the staff would actually hinder us a bit. Thing is, that empower does not, to me, merit the extra protection or the extra range that you get from the scepter. Because, let's face it, you are squishy. You're much squishier than anything else. And besides, in World v World, this build can kite warriors like crazy, and that's cool. Okay, so this will be the PvE build. It's still viable, albeit a bit underpowered. You still have decent amount of power. You still have squishiness on armor and hit points, but nothing you can do about it. And you're not inflicting as much damage as before. Good times, good times. Not. Okay, build number 2. I'll try to give as short of an outline as possible in order to avoid any unnecessary chatter that will actually destroy your perception of the builds. So this is the 3-in-1 build. Everything that revolved around it, like this is the meditation option because it gives the most damage. Traits are pretty much the same, no changes. And the gear is the same as before. I just added the sigils because I discovered that the sigil of accuracy is much better now because it gives a flat out critical chance increase. Bloodlust is of course a must because you'll be killing like crazy, and I split the weapons to offense and defense. First things first, if you go defense and you go to the mace shield like me, you can opt to play a staff, it's perfectly okay. I added Sigil of Renewal just to heal myself and the allies, and Sigil of Battle because it's on swap and it's 20 seconds of might. So by the time those 9 seconds roll over for the weapon swap, you'll still have your 3 stacks of might when you switch back to the greatsword. And since you'll be critting, you'll be getting might because of that number 8 trait. It's pretty much the same as before. So here we are still at 64% crit damage, but our critical chance is nowhere near perfect. So it's 56 plus 20 from Fury, let's say it's about 80. Let's say 80, because it's a good round number. So 80 over 65% extra crit damage based on this table, which puts you at 215, means that your damage will increase by 1.92. That will be your multiplier for the damage. Which is still substantial, it's almost 2 times the damage, but well, it's nowhere near as good as before. That actually got me thinking, and I started theory crafting a new build. And that's a build that I will certainly make. This is this build. It's an all-out power build. On this build, I went for max power, as much power as possible, while still using the shouts, because those are the best support for everyone. I switched the traits to 60260, which is like 30-0, 10-30-0 for the people who are still used to the old style pre-patch. And I had very specific expectations from this build. First, I wanted as much power as possible. Hence my putting all the points here in power, all the 6. Because even if it doesn't affect the direct damage as much as I wanted, you can still give yourself a substantial amount of damage. First, Fire Rat, very simple, very useful. 10% against burning foes all around. You'll be burning foes all the time. Zealous Blade. I picked this one only for the extra damage increase on the greatsword. And I picked the new trait, the Amplified Rat. Burning damage is increased. Now, we are not doing as much condition damage, but any extra damage you can get with this build will be more than welcome. You do have some stupid uh, burning on every fifth attack and such, so this can only help the burning damage, and this is good. I'd pick this over anything else because I don't really see anything better than this. I'm not playing Scepter with this build because if I'm not using Mace and a Shield, I'm using the Staff. Simple as that. In the Valor tree, I could not forgo the strength in numbers. This 150 flat out toughness increase to yourself and 5 nearby allies is just way too good. And in the honor tree, we went all the way for the pure voice. This makes your shouts turn conditions to boons. And it works on all 5 allies that are around you. Here I went for the Writ of Persistence because of the synergy with Symbolic Power and Symbolic Exposure. And if I go, let's say, Greatsword Staff, I just switch to Two-Handed Mastery and I'm done. Because both weapons will get their durations, skill durations decreased. And of course, reduce recharge on shouts. Simple, elegant, all-out power. This amounts to 2.787 power, 22k hit points, 3146 armor, which when boosted by 150 because of the strength in numbers puts you at a very decent 3300 armor, which is great for even for tanking and which is great for dungeons. The health is okay, it's more than enough. Here I still split my sigils to offensive and defensive. Offensive means Sigil of Battle. When you swap from defense to offense, you get your 3 stacks of might, and then you'll still be getting your stacks of might on Wrathful Strike on the Greatsword. So you will be stacking some might, not as much as you'll probably like, and not as much as this build does, because this build has empowering might on crits, but it will still be okay. Then you have the Sigil of Bloodlust for the very simple reason that once you charge it fully, you're going over 3k power, and that's a very decent amount. On the defense front, I'm using the Sigil of Renewal for a quick heal, because even if you go on defense, come on, let's get real. If you go on defense, this means some of your allies are already damaged, or you're damaged. So some healing would never hurt. And second, I am not used, even when I'm going on defense, to waste damage. So I put a Sigil of Force on the mace, because this Sigil of Force gives you a flat out 5% damage, which makes your mace not as shitty as it's supposed to be. As food, this is the cheapest possible food. It's like 4 silver a piece. It's 100 power, it's 70 vitality, it's amazing. And it's, come on, 4 silver a piece, what's 4 silver? Then we have your sharpening stones, whether they're potent or not, it's all the same. For the purpose of this all power build, I used runes of the brawler, the former runes of the warrior. Its power, its toughness. I don't like the 3 stacks of might on healing skill, because you have only 1 healing skill in 40 seconds. So no, you could do that only when you have a healing skill that recharges very quickly. So all that plus an Azurite orb, because that's the only orb that gives you power, toughness, and vitality. Power, toughness, vitality, soldier gear, all around amounts to this. And I'd say that's a very, very good tanky option. If you want, and if you go do lots of dungeons, or you do lots of places when you have tons of conditions, you can switch those runes to the former soldier runes, which are now called runes of the trooper. Those are vitality toughness runes with shouts that remove conditions. So this rune stacks with pure voice. And if you want to make yourself even tankier, you can remove Pure of Voice and go Force of Will for an extra 3k hit points. This is amazing. This turns you into such a tank that can revive allies while taking damage and asking which mosquito bit him just now, even though he suffered a crit for 2k damage. It is up to you to decide. I gave you those 3 builds for one very specific reason. It is a personal preference what you want to do with your build. Do you want damage? Do you want sustained damage? Do you want tankiness? You will have to decide for yourself. I will help you though. Let me whip out the stupid Windows calculator. We are now going to test how much those builds will do against a certain target. First things first. We will put this build, our 3-in-1 Guardian build, versus the new power build. And let's see how much of a damage this build would do over this build, because it's clear this build, since it has more crits, will do more damage than this build. We're going to use everything as it is. We'll take stuff in a very simple way, meaning we'll use everything on an even ground. For example, we'll use the base greatsword damage versus this base greatsword damage, and we'll not add skill specific coefficients, because those coefficients will just make the calculations much more difficult, and I like to keep things as base as they go, because if a build uses the very basic number 1 strike, it will do the following amount of damage. So we use the very basic skill. It doesn't have a coefficient. The coefficient is 1. So we take 2107 times the damage of the greatsword, base damage 1045. This is also the worst case scenario. Times, here we have critical chance and critical damage. Let's say that this critical chance is closer to 80%, which is 56 plus 20 from Fury. Let's say that you are going to crit, and in order to make a better calculation, if it's 80%, this means under perfect conditions you will crit 4 out of 5 hits. So let's say that we'll make the calculation over 5 hits in which 4 of them will crit, 1 of them will not. So here we crit. Here we multiply that by 2.14. And we get some raw damage which is in the millions. This you divide by the armor of a target. We'll take the heavy armor target game-wise. This means that your hit will inflict 1812 damage on a crit. Let's say that 4 basic hits will crit, because we do expect those 80% to work, so 40 basic hits will crit, 1 basic hit will not crit. Here we have 7248 damage. We'll put that on memory plus. So the last hit will not crit. This means 2107 times 1045 divided by 2600, the armor of a target. This means that this hit will inflict roughly 847 damage. We'll put that on memory plus as well. So, all in all, with this build, if we do everything as it is and under perfect conditions and to the worst damage possible, this build will inflict 8085 damage. Let's compare this build to this one. So here we do not have crits, so we'll take the basic damage times 5. So here we have 2787 power. I'm not taking the Bloodlust Sigil into account because this build has the same thing. So that's 2787 times 1045 divided by 2600 the armor of a heavy target, so you will be inflicting roughly 1120 on a basic hit against a heavy armor target, times 5, over 5 hits. This is 5600 flat. Let's put that on memory minus, so we can see what's the difference between the damage of the two builds. So this means that this build will inflict 2485 less damage than this build. This build will outdamage the other build on 5 basic hits with 2500 damage roughly. Now comes the big question. Are you willing to sell the difference between those two builds, armor and hit point wise, for that 2500 damage? That is always the question that I'm asking myself. Is 2300 armor versus 2758 and 22k hit points versus 16k worth 2500 damage? I'm not going to answer that question for you. You should answer that yourself. Are you willing to do that? Simple as that. And we're going to do the same, for the perfect crit build. So we'll take the perfect crit build versus this build, and we'll see what kind of damage difference the perfect crit build has over this build. And we'll ask ourselves, is it worth it? So, before I make the calculation, there is something to clear out. Now, the sword has lower basic damage, but we are going to use the 1045 basic damage for the sword because of this trait. Powerful blades means 10% damage on the sword. And since we are using the sword, it's a very simple calculation. It has 950 base plus 10%. As you can see, that's exactly 95, which means 1045. The difference between the greatsword and the sword is exactly 10% damage. So that trait turns our sword into a greatsword. So let's take the very same calculation, with the difference that here we have perfect crits. This means that all 5 hits will crit. 2113 times 1045 times 2.14 divided by 2600. This build will inflict 1817 damage on a heavy target. Times 5. You'll be looking at, worst case scenario, you'll be looking at, say, 9085 damage on a heavy target. Memory plus. Let's take this build. This build will crit 4 out of 5 times, as before. 1045 times 2.14 divided by 2600. 1812 times 4 on minus memory, and the same thing to 107 times 10445 divided by 2600 was about 4847, that on memory minus, and the difference between those two builds is exactly 990 damage in favor of the perfect crit build. Now it's back to asking ourselves, are you willing to sell 2300 hit points for 990 damage that this build would have over this build? Granted, you can boost this build. You can for example go I use the barrel orbs for a very simple reason, because it has power, it has vitality, and it has ferocity, and those are the 3 things that are lacking in the perfect crit build. Here I use the orbs, which is the basic build that we did before. You can add runes, you can fiddle a bit with those builds, and you can get to some very decent amounts of toughness and hit points. Thing is, you should always ask yourself, what would you be expecting from these builds? Now, feel free to do so. Feel free to play with those builds a bit. Use the calculator, fool around if you like them, and see what's going to happen if you do so. Up to you, really. But in our situation, we have to ask ourselves, is 1000 damage roughly tradable for 2300 hit points? And in comparison to this build, since the other build out damaged the other one with like 2700, let's add 1000 to that. So this build versus this build means, are you willing to sell roughly 9k hit points and roughly 500 armor with strength in numbers? Okay, let's make it simpler. 8k hit points, 600 armor. Are you willing to sell those for 3700 damage? Ask yourself that and try to answer for yourself. I don't really need an answer. I know what I'm going to do for myself. I have already decided. I will let the DPSers DPS and I will play the Guardian the way it is meant to be played. With lots of power, with lots of condition removals on allies, as useful as it comes, as a support, but with good damage. This is how I am going to play my Guardian as of right now, post-patch. Good damage and support. I don't want to hinder my party by going for healing power or for something like this. I am going to do as much damage as possible while keeping the best support options available. And this means that most likely I will do something like this. I will sell a bit more damage. I'm using the sell word leisurely because it is pretty much selling. You sell something to gain something. In this case we sold 150 power. Okay, roughly 170. You sold 170 power for more hit points and for extra condition removal with shouts, which means that our shouts will remove two conditions. One condition will be converted to a boon, and a second condition will be removed completely. This means every shout removes two conditions, and that's huge in some dungeons. You can support your party amazingly like this. And even if you can't support your party with condition removal because there are not that many conditions, you just switch to that freaking number 13 trait and you have roughly 27k hit points. That's huge. With that you can tank everything. Even if your whole party is down on the ground dying, you will be able to rest them without any of them dying, especially if you're being hit by a couple of enemies, because you have the hit points to deal with that. Plain and simple. Oh well, I think that pretty much covers it. It all boils down to, what are you willing to sacrifice for what? Especially as a Guardian. The Guardian is really well protected. It can do substantial amount of damage, but if this patch proved something, is that the Guardian had much lower damage than the Warrior, if you go for perfect crits and such. Now it's even less so. So let the DPSers DPS, and how about we play the Guardian the way it's supposed to be. Support with good damage, good all around, useful all around, a guardian that can help a party, and a guardian that can keep the party going regardless of what happens. Or so I see it. I still think this build is perfect for farming in PvE, especially because you have lots of decent range damage and very good mobility with the sword and the meditations. Yet still, if you're looking for an all-rounder build, that's the way you're supposed to be playing it. Simple as that. And that's pretty much the build I will most likely switch to once I've made more materials for the Ascended gear. Well guys, I think that pretty much covers the changes in the post April 15 patch. Lots of things change. Damage shown, critical hits went down. Money making options some money making options got destroyed. Prices plummeted. Some prices got up, especially on sigils and runes and such, for things that became more useful. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. It's like a new Guild Wars right now. And a new Guild Wars means we need to adapt to it. And pretty much that's my way of adapting to it. And I don't feel bad about it. Okay guys, that's all from me, and see you in the next video. Take care, stay safe, and have fun with Guild Wars right now. Goodbye.